Introductory at Ncaa's Guide.
Every year, a significant number of foreign-trained lawyers immigrate to Canada, and hundreds of Canadian citizens return to Canada after obtaining law degrees abroad.
Upon returning to Canada, they have to get their credentials assessed by the Ncaa's and write several equivalency exams before being eligible to be admitted to any of the respective provincial bars.
The Ncaa exams are examinations very similar to those taken in the Canadian law schools. They're fact-based and open book examinations that take 4 hours to write. They're currently administered online.
These exams, which are graded on a pass or fail basis, are done without any help of the Ncaa. This is where we come in.
I have written and passed the Canadian Administrative Law Exams.
I have taken and passed the Canadian Professional Responsibility examination.
I have written and passed the Canadian Criminal Law examinations.
I have written and passed the Canadian Constitutional Law examination.
I have written and passed the Foundations of Canadian Law examination. We have all been through these examinations. We understand the difficulty that the Ncaa examinations present and will help candidates overcome these difficulties and obstacles in understanding the course materials and the exam format.
We do this through intensive classes, revisions, spot tests, and exam review workshops. We do not believe in a one-size-fits-all approach. Our study sessions are focused on helping candidates understand the course materials in a way unique and personal to achieving their study goals.
We have a good track record and excellent results from our past and present candidates. If you're writing the Ncaa exams and you want to pass them all at your first attempt, join our classes today.
Okay, so good morning. My name is Funto. I'll be your guide for Canadian Professional Responsibility. This is the introductory class. We do have intensive classes that run for a course of 4 weeks after the introductory class, and our final class is our exam preparation study class. For those who are on the intensive classes, they do attend the exam preparation study classes as part of the package. But if you do not join the classes, then you can pay and attend as an external student for that. So what the introductory class is going to do is going to run you through the syllabus. We've already talked about downloading the syllabus from the site. Did you find it?
Yes, I did.
Perfect. In that same place, if you see where there's a thing called samples, you can get sample questions. So when you finish studying and you need to go through questions for professional responsibility, I think they have 2 there that you can also download and answer questions yourself. Okay?
Okay.
Did you see that?
I just see sample questions by the side. Let's see. Yeah, I can see the sample questions.
Fantastic. Okay, perfect. So the introductory class is just trying to demystify the course Canadian Professional Responsibility and help you understand what it entails and points out the things that you need to focus on when studying. Then we have the exam prep, which is going to help you through like how to structure your questions in the Ncaa format, so that you know what they're looking for and you know how to answer them and what exactly you need to put in the examinations. And then we have like answering questions and all of that in addition. Okay, so if you look at your syllabus, there should be about 11 chapters. And there's something I always point out to all the candidates that come to us. Those particular chapters, in each explanation of the Ncaa's chapters, there are some questions that you should be able to answer, kind of like guiding questions to tell you what they expect you to have learned when you finish that chapter. Okay? Yeah. So for example, in chapter 1, you can see what is a profession.
Okay. What page is that? I'm trying to see the chapters.
Page 4.
4.
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm on the right one.
It says syllabus, page 1. Page 2 has overview, course objectives, formats, and materials. Page 4 goes to part 2, course outline and readings.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the beginning of the syllabus, really. Everything is introductory.
Okay.
So if you look at that, you're supposed to learn about the legal profession, lawyers in the society, and the society of lawyers. And there are a few questions, A to H, that kind of juggle your memory after you finish reading. What is a profession? What is public interest? And things like that. So basically, if you run through the syllabus, you would notice that there are actually questions scattered around the syllabus like that you should focus on. Okay? So Canadian professional responsibility is split into 4 main sections, section A, B, C, and D. I know a lot of people don't like focusing on section A. It's very jurisprudential, it's theoretical. So that's where you discuss things. The title is The Legal Profession and Lawyers in Society and the Society of Lawyers. So you talk about the profession and professionalism. You talk about the law as a business, the law as a profession, how it originated, why it is a profession, what are the requirements, or what exactly makes it a profession. Then there are things like the socialist view on what a profession is, the economist view on what a profession is. They also go into arguments such as, is it beneficial for us to be self-regulated? So things you should know about a profession. One of the properties of a profession, just like law, medicine, accounting, is that they're self-regulated. And what does self-regulation means? It means that if any of the members of that association or that profession does anything negative or contrary to the ethics of that profession, they're allowed to adjudicate themselves as a body. Okay, so they themselves would sit on the panel. If it's a law issue, they would have a disciplinary panel that consists of other lawyers, and they themselves would sit down as experts in the field and actually adjudicate on what the issues are. Now, the thing behind that is they believe that, well, they're the experts in their field. They know the nitty-gritty of the field. If you get an outsider or somebody who's not a lawyer to come and adjudicate, it's a little negative because they don't know the ins and outs of the profession. Okay? So you get to deal with self-regulation. What is a profession? There are a few cases there that will be discussed. Then there's also the law of business and business as a law, the business of law and the law as a business. It's going to consider what you think, whether you think the legal practice is an altruistic practice and you really don't have to consider the business sides of it. All you have to do is get your clients justice. Or they would also talk about whether you need to, as a lawyer, understand what running a business is and actually building a business from your law. So they would look at both ends of that and discuss that. So those kind of questions come out in like the short answer questions in your examination, where they ask you, they want to get your own opinion, they want to get your own feel. So it would really be, this is what this party says, and this is what the other side says, and this is what I feel, this is the side I take. You always have to conclude with your own decision, okay? There's regulation of lawyers and regulation of the legal profession, which is where I talked about self-regulation. That's, I think, chapter 2 and 3 in your textbooks. We do have notes on the website, on the Ncaa Guides website, if you're interested in purchasing notes. We have a very good lawyer, Manuel Akinshola, and he has summarized the points that you need for like to answer the questions, or basically bullet points. In some areas, there's just a lot of words and information, but he's been able to capture what is actually important and what you need to focus on. Okay, so that's the first part of section A. Section B then goes on to ethics, lawyering, and professional regulation. Okay, so this section B is really the meat of professional responsibility. So apart from the fact that they'll discuss what is ethics, so with ethics, there are 2 main focuses. You can either know of ethics as a body of rules that govern you, okay, the the rights, the ethical things that we should know, the body of rules. If you hadn't done,
regulation of lawyers and regulation of the legal profession?
No, we're now on part B, ethics. So regulation of lawyer and regulation of the legal profession talks about self-regulation, which we just discussed. So that was page 6 of your syllabus, right?
I see that now.
Now we move to part B, ethics, lawyering, and professional regulation. Okay, when you do read part A, they will tell you things like the definition of ethics. There's an article in part A as well, Trevor C. Farrow's article on dominant and sustainable models of lawyering. The dominant model is the most important, well, the most known model. That's what really works in our society as a whole. It's seen as the traditional model. So some people call it the traditional model, other people call it the dominant model. It's where the client is the all and in all. The client is the most important aspect of your practice. Whatever the client wants, the client gets. If the client wants you to carry out a particular trial or particular action in a particular way, you do everything in your power to get what your client actually wants, okay? And a lot of the times, irrespective to your own personal beliefs, your own personal cultures, what you think, you're unbiased, totally neutral in getting the client's objectives, okay? Now, Trevor's main article is telling you that he doesn't think this dominant model is sustainable, okay? He's telling you that he thinks there are other things and other factors that must be considered in the practice of law. Okay, so things like your own values, your culture, your religion, things like justice, things like public policy, things like the court, and how you react to other lawyers in court. He believes all these other things must also be considered when pursuing justice, because you are not just your client's lawyer, you're also an officer of justice, an officer of the court. So, for example, even though you're not allowed to turn down clients, you might feel, because running through the whole professional responsibility syllabus is an issue of competency. Are you a competent lawyer? And if you look at your model code, so another thing you need to download and print is your syllabus and your model code. Okay?
Where will I get the model code?
The FLSC website. So before the end of the class, maybe I would look for it maybe on a break and drop it in the chat, okay, for you to see. If not, if you Google model code FLSC, you know what FLSC is, right? Federation of Law Societies Canada. If you Google model code, you should be able to download the most recent one.
Okay.
Now, the model code has all the body of rules for lawyers in Canada. So all the rules that you must abide by. It starts with an index. The index just tells you what's in the code. It has interpretations and definitions of some particular words like client, conflict of interest, lawyer. Then it goes on to things like standards of the legal profession, relationship to clients, competence, quality of service. These really are the rules, the ethical rules that bind or guide lawyers in their practice. The way the model code is structured is it not only gives you the rules, okay? Excuse me. Sorry. It not only gives you the rules, then it has things called commentaries. Okay? So what has happened is if you go through the start or the beginning of your syllabus, it talks about sources of Canadian professional responsibility. And we've learned that one of these sources is actual disciplinary matters or cases that have been handled by other lawyers. Okay, so for example, Rule 3.4 talks about you shouldn't have any intimate relations with clients. Now, it hasn't been explained. That is just the rule. Okay, and you go ahead and a case happens and something has occurred and they report it to the Law Society. When they sit down and deliberate on this case and they come up with like solutions or fines or whatever the solution is, where they think the lawyer has been ethical or unethical, and they realize that the rule is not explanatory enough, they would add to the commentaries of that rule and say, in this matter, this is also seen as contravening this rule. Okay, so a lot of the explanations in your commentaries is trying to tell you what that rule is trying to say. So they might give you examples, they might give you instances when it occurred. Sometimes they'll give you guidelines. So being an ethical lawyer is not just abiding by the rules, it's also making sure you are able to cure it if you do make a mistake, because we know that most of these things are mistakes. Okay, so you make a mistake, maybe there's a conflict or there's a breach of confidentiality, the model code would have some way that you can actually cure this issue, because you may not have known at the start of taking on the client. The instant you find out, you report it or you highlight it and you try and find a cure. So for something like conflict of interest, for example, your cure would be to get the consent of both clients where there is conflict to go ahead in their representation. Okay, so commentaries are really important. I would also advise that before you start reading your notes or the textbook, you should run through the model code at least once. Don't make notes, don't highlight. It's not anything, it's just making sure that you are aware of the information that is in there. It's a lot of information, but just read through the rules. Then as you're reading your notes or reading your textbook, then you're remembering that, oh, I saw this somewhere, and you're able to highlight it. I saw this somewhere as well. Oh, okay, this is the explanation of that. Okay. So the model code is very important. You do have to take your model code into the examination because you're going to reference those rules. So as you're answering your questions, you would have to say, oh, what I'm saying is from rule this, that, and then go on to do your analysis. You don't have to cite the rule word for word. They already know what the rule is, but you have to mention it in your issue and rule part. Do you know how to do the IRAC method? Is this your first Ncaa examination?
Yes.
Okay, so the Ncaa examinations mostly structure their answers, even though it might be a loose structure, in the IRAC method.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's the issue, the rule, the analysis, and your conclusion. Your issue is usually gotten from the question they have asked you in the question paper. So after reading the scenario or reading the information they have to give you for that question, they will ask you a final question at the bottom. You can generate your issue from that. So the issue on hand right now is that my principal partner is requiring an opinion based on the ethical acts of this lawyer or the ethical acts of this matter. So whatever that issue is or question is, you can raise your issue. Now the rules section, right? This is all going to be discussed in the examination preparation class, but the rules section is now where you put your model code rules. So in this scenario that I have read, in this section that I have dealt with, these are the rules that apply to it. Rule 7.1, Rule 3.2, Rule 3.5, Rule 3.6. This is where you refer to the model code, okay? Now, in referencing the model code, you then go to your analysis, which is all the information that you have gotten from your textbooks, the information you've gotten from your notes, what you've learned while reading the course. You put your analysis there, and then you make sure you conclude with your own opinion and cures. So these are the ethical issues that have arisen. I think this occurred. This is what is believed to happen. This is one side of the coin. This is the other side of the coin. This is my opinion on it. And I think it can be cured by, in the model code, it's written that we need to seek the consent of so person. We need to follow these guidelines. Or you go ahead and give a remedy and say, in another matter or in another case, the lawyer was fined or suspended. You understand what I mean? So basically you can give your own suggestions as well. Okay. Now the rule part is not just expecting you to put the rules of the model code, you also add your cases. So if there are any cases to support, you mention them in the rules. Those are facts. The rules section is factual items that are associated with the question.
All right.
Okay. So the model code is really important knowing where everything is in your model code is really important. When you finish studying, it's advisable to also index your materials. You will keep hearing people over time telling you to index. And that's exactly, I was going to show you mine. I don't know if you'd be able to see it, but
Wow.
everything is indexed. Okay. Now, the reason you do this is unlike your home jurisdiction where you're from, it's an open book exam. So it's not just, do I have the information? It's also, can I find the information I'm looking for and reference it in the exam? So it's also a time-based exam. They know that everybody sitting these exams is aware of the information. They know that you already practice law, study law somewhere else. So really this time, putting you on that timer and seeing if you can answer these questions within that time and hit all the points that they want is also a skill that you need to learn. Okay, so after studying, actually sitting down and looking at their questions and seeing if you can answer it, reference your documents, give them their information is really important as well. Okay. So indexing is pretty important. Your model code, your syllabus. Let's see if we can go on with the rest of the syllabus. So we've talked about section A. A lot of people do find that it's harder to concentrate when you start with section A. It can be boring. Well, some people see it as boring, but the reason I would ask you to actually read part A first is that a lot of the things you learn there, ethics, competent lawyer, quality of service, are things you're going to see in all the recurring chapters. It's kind of like a foundation. Okay, so just plow through it, try and understand it, and then you keep referencing it. So if they're talking about section B, which is talking about the adversary system, lawyers and ethics. So section B is talking about conflict, lawyers and ethics, right? When you get there, you would always refer to a competent lawyer. Let me look for the exact topic. Ethics, lawyering, and professional regulation. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no way you're going to talk about this section without talking about a competent lawyer. You must understand what a competent lawyer is, what is required of a competent lawyer, offering of quality of service, your fiduciary relationship of loyalty to your client, owing, there's some duties that you generally owe to your client, okay? It would start with talking about the lawyer-client relationship. When is the lawyer-client relationship formed? When does it start? When do you have to keep his information confidential? When exactly do you become the person's lawyer? And it's been seen from past relationships or past cases that it doesn't always start when you signed the document, when you signed the contract. It can start before that. And why? When a person comes to you as a lawyer, so the issue with professional responsibility ethics is that you must always be at the highest echelon of ethics when you're practicing. They don't want to see that you have done anything that can in any way undermine not just your profession or your practice, but the practice of law as a whole. Okay, so when you are starting a relationship with a client and you say, oh, we haven't signed a retainer yet, okay, and you go ahead and share that person's information, you have breached the person's duty of confidentiality to that person. So what does that mean? It means even before you go on a retainer and sign the dotted line, just that client sitting across from you on your desk and giving you information, you're already bound by the duty of confidentiality to keep that client's information confidential. So they can ask you questions about formation. And yes, we know that formation is when this person signs. But even if you don't go ahead and represent that client, maybe you feel you're not competent enough to represent them. An example is there's a part that talks about language rights. If you cannot offer competent service to your client in the language they understand, you're not competent enough to handle that case. Okay, so your duty in that instance is to find somebody and offer without payment, offer them another lawyer who is willing to actually give them this service in the language they fully understand. But the information that you have garnered at the beginning of the interaction, you still have to keep confidential. Okay, and then another thing you note in this part is you should be able to tell the difference between privilege and confidentiality. Privilege information is usually smaller than what encompasses confidential information, and also where they overlap. And obviously, there will be some instances when you need to release your confidential information to the court, and those are also listed in your notes as well. Just note that as information, so that if you, for example, you have a scenario and something happens in the scenario, maybe they show that the client has committed fraud or something, you are able to say, oh, there was fraud committed, and due to this, I had to release the information, or somebody's life was in danger. There's a list of things where the information that you're keeping confidential can be released for the safety of the public and things like that. Maybe somebody wants to harm people in the public, or they want to bomb somewhere. You understand what I mean? Just for the preservation of the public. And this is where you can also rope in or realize that law is not just about your client's objectives.
Yeah.
You do have to consider the public, you do have to consider other people, you do have to consider justice as well. Okay. So that's the lawyer-client relationship handled. Then preservation of client confidences, we've already hit that. And then conflict of interest is like a major issue. In every Ncaa examination, you will get a question on conflict of interest. Okay. You need to focus on that. It's actually the greatest portion in the notes, if I'm correct, or in the textbook as well. Okay. One of the obligations of a client, or a lawyer to a client, is conflict of interest. And in my classes, I always try to stress the fact that conflict of interest doesn't stand on its own. There's usually a backstory that builds up towards conflict of interest. Okay. You do as a lawyer have a fiduciary. Hold on a second. Give me a second. Sorry for that. Just needed to switch off my ringer. Okay, so there's a backstory to conflict of interest. First of all, as a lawyer, you have a fiduciary interest or fiduciary relationship with your client. Do you want to take a 5-minute break? Okay. You have a fiduciary relationship with your client in protecting their interest, okay? And having this fiduciary relationship, there's a case, Ncaa, very important case. They refer to it a lot in professional responsibility. Now, Ncaa came up with the 3 C's, okay? I can say it from memory, but I want to see if I have the exact way that it is stated. No, my note isn't here. Anyway, so conflict of interest is one. Keeping, let me get it for you, actually. Give me a second. I'll try and get the exact way they're phrased, but they're referred to as the 3 C's. Okay, so Ncaa believes that not only do you have a fiduciary relationship with your client, but you have a duty of loyalty. Okay, so fiduciary relationship with your client creates duties to your client, okay? And this is a duty of loyalty. you would have read about the duty of loyalty in Part A, which is why I say sometimes you do really need to read Part A to understand some of the things that they're saying. And under this duty of loyalty is broken into the 3 C's. One of these C's is the duty to avoid the breach of conflict of interest. Okay, breach of confidentiality is also, because when people say conflict of interest, it's not just, oh, there's a conflict of interest. It's that you have breached your duty to your client to avoid conflict of interest. Okay, so that's one of the C's, conflict of interest. The second C is to offer competent service. And under this competent service is where they capture confidentiality. So there's no particular reference to confidentiality, but confidentiality is believed to be under this competent service. Okay. Now, in protecting your client from conflict of interest, there are different standards and different levels. The services that you offer to your client. The services that you offer to your client can be based on a lawyer-to-lawyer relationship, okay? It can be based on a former client and present client relationship, okay? So as you're offering services to your client, you can have a former client and a present client services conflict. For example, this is just a light example. One of them is trying to buy land and the other owns the land. You already have information about the seller. You've worked on his matters for about 10, 15 years. And the new client comes to you and asks you that they want to go into this transaction. And you know that you already have pertinent confidential information on the seller. And there might be a conflict in such an issue. Okay, so that's an instance where there's a conflict of interest between 2 clients that you are representing. Okay, there could be a conflict of interest between 2 former clients. It doesn't have to be a new client and an old client. So when we call someone a former client, it could be that you represented that client in an old firm and you've left the firm. Okay, and you're now in a new firm. It doesn't matter that you've left that firm. That person used to be your client. You do have information on that person, so you will keep that information confidential. In instances, you either state that you cannot represent the new client, or if you feel that you can still offer competent service to this client at the time, you can seek consent from both parties. So are we now saying that means that as a lawyer, you cannot represent 2 conflicting parties or 2 parties on either end of a particular transaction? That's not true. The model code will tell you that there can be concurrent representation. Okay, so if the model code tells you there's concurrent representation, that means, of course, you can go ahead and represent 2 people. But then how do you cure? You know, I've been saying it that every time you see there's an ethical issue, there has to be a cure. How do you cure the fact that there's an issue? Now, in curing this fact, they've given you a list. You can either seek their consent. If both of them give you consent, you can go ahead and suggest that they also seek independent legal advice. Okay, so you can tell the client that I know that I'm going to represent you and you already said that I can represent you, but please also go ahead and seek independent legal advice. Now, the client can decide not to and say, no, we're very confident with you and want to go ahead. That's fine. But you have found a way to make sure that you have declared that there is a conflict and you have tried to cure it. So you can concurrently represent, for example, some people who have non-discordant divorces, for example, they've already settled how they're sharing property and who's getting what. They can decide to have the same lawyer. Okay. So conflict not only arises when people are on opposing ends, it could also arise due to a personal relationship. So there's this part of the model code that I know that a few candidates miss, and that is the fact that you shouldn't have intimate relationship with your client. So that's how it's cited in the model code. Let me see if I can find it for you. It's cited as intimate relationship. So conflict of interest is covered by 3.4. 3.4 goes all the way to -20. So the model code has 3.4-1, 3.4-2, -3. For conflict of interest, it goes all the way to -20. Okay. Now, 3.4-1 says that it's under the duty to avoid conflict of interest. Another thing I'd like to point out, conflict of interest is one of the few phrases that is defined by your model code. So if you go to section 1 of your model code, there's a definition. So you can refer to that in your exam. Not everything has been defined by the code, but conflict is seen as so important that they had to define it in the code, okay? So when you're doing your IRAC, obviously in your rule, you put the fact that it's defined in rule this, rule 1, whatever, and then you go ahead to say that the information you're actually citing and quoting is 3.4- whatever as well, okay? Now 3.4-1 says that a lawyer must not act or continue to act for a client where there is a conflict of interest except as permitted under this code. And like I told you earlier, a lot of these rules are vague. Not really vague, but you can't really tell what it encompasses. So 3.4-1 goes ahead to have commentaries. It has about 12 commentaries to explain. Now, commentary 11D says that a lawyer has a sexual or close personal relationship with a client. These are examples where conflicts may occur. Okay, so not only with your client-to-client relationship, you can have conflict with lawyer-to-client relationship as well. Okay, now close personal or sexual relationship could also entail family members. And in my last diet, my last set of classes, somebody was asking and trying to understand how a family member could entail a close personal relationship. And my explanation was like, let's give an example and say this lawyer is dating maybe the daughter of a client. Being the person dating, having a close relationship, he's not having the close relationship with the client directly. But for example, if he goes for dinner at their house and there's a general family discussion, he can garner confidential information while at that dinner table, which he can use in his cases. Okay, and the thing about being a lawyer is they know, once they know that you have the information, they can't tell whether you are going to use it or not to that person's detriment. So they have to protect the law by saying a conflict has arisen and you need to cure it. Okay, so you have to note that close and sexual personal relationship with the client. There are a few cases in the syllabus that talk about, for example, there's a case where a lawyer was dating his client. When he realized that it might be an issue, he just gave her a consent form to fill. He didn't ask her to read it. He didn't ask her to get independent. Hold on a second. Thank you. So, like I said, this is going to be recorded. So I know you're taking in a lot of information at the same time, but you should be able to go back to our YouTube channel. It'll be uploaded and then you can go through and actually listen to it again and make notes. So this is basically just for you to understand the structure, okay? So like I was saying, there was a case where there was a lawyer, he was dating his client, he realized what he was doing was wrong, and he just gave his client like a consent form to go ahead and sign. Do you understand? Instead of like, you have to actually sit down, make sure they understand the conflict, make sure they understand why they're consenting, offer them. So there's a step-by-step process to going through it. But he just created, what do you call it, the consent form, gave it to her, and he hoped that that would cover any of the issues that might arise. Okay, so that's unacceptable. Okay, so when also considering conflict, you can realize that conflict can occur. I think I already mentioned that if you're moving from one law firm to the other law firm, conflict can also arise. So this can occur with articling students. For example, you articled in a firm and then you move ahead to go and train in a new firm or be an associate. It can happen that you can have conflict between clients that you have seen before and clients that you are handling now. So there's a whole section of guidelines. Let me check. This should be 3.2-20 actually, which talks about law firm disqualification. Yes, 3.4-20, law firm disqualification. So when this occurs and the lawyer is with a new firm, it's no longer just seen as the lawyer's unethical conduct or the lawyer's breach of ethics. It's seen as the new firm's breach of ethics. So this lawyer has the obligation to let them know that the person or the clients that they're against, he or she has represented in the past. Okay? Now, when this happens, there's a set of rules called screening measures that have to be taken to ensure that the law firm stands in a good light. So if you notice, most of these ethical things, most of these issues that are arising, they're not just to make sure that the lawyer, so they're to ensure that you have your client's respect. They're to ensure that you do not bring disrepute to the legal profession as a whole. Okay? So anything that happens, they're trying to make sure that everything is done in line to make sure that you preserve the integrity of the legal profession. Now, what we would notice is the fact that our profession actually works and is based on integrity. So if there's no integrity or people don't trust you, nobody's going to want to come to you to defend them. And if that is eroded totally, then the legal profession really doesn't exist because nobody is going to come to you to defend their rights. Okay? So they need to see you as a neutral party. They also need to know that you are not biased. They also need to know that you are of the highest ethical standard. Okay? So these screening measures that I listed here is exactly what they expect the law firm to go through and do to prove that they are actually working on. So they're not going to try and take away clients from you. They're just making sure that you find a way to cure it. And in this instance, it's listed that a screening lawyer should have no involvement in the new law firm's representation of this new client. A screening lawyer should not discuss the current matter with any information relating to the representation of the former client. So basically, you're supposed to create an invisible screen between the lawyer that says, I've represented the alternate client before, and this particular case. They should have no handling of the case. They should have no handling of the matter. They should basically not have anything to do with it, to show that no information was transferred from that lawyer, okay, to the people handling this case. So they put up a screen and make sure that that person is totally removed from the matter that they're handling. So that's the solution in that instance. In a matter that has to deal with a law firm, it's not just seeking consent in this instance. Now is that the law firm can go ahead and screen that lawyer, because you can't have a law firm that has 40, 50 lawyers and say every single client that all these 40, 50 lawyers have worked on, they cannot represent against. It's going to be totally impossible. Okay, so this is the way that they help protect the new law firm. And then there are also other rules in the model code that you can look at in relation to conflict there. Okay, so that's actually part B. Part B is mostly confidentiality, conflict of interest, formation of the contract. So part B deals with the person-to-person interaction when talking about ethics, preservation of client confidences, conflict of interest, and then it goes ahead to the adversary system and lawyers as advocates. Okay, so the adversary system and lawyers as advocate talks about lawyers as counselors, lawyers in court, zealous representation. Zealous representation is taken from the dominant model. Remember what we talked about, the dominant model, where the client is the most important person and all of that. A lot of the time you will hear the word zealous representation with regards to talking about the dominant model. And when you're an adversary, of course, you're representing your client. So that whole area talks about duties to clients, document production, trial tactics, witnesses preparation, anything that you're doing under that, and the ethical ways to handle it. For example, let's give an example. You can't, if you do like an investigation into a matter, it's your duty and obligation to list all the documents that were seen during that investigation. Okay? Sometimes you know that some of the documents you're listing might be contrary to your case, but as an ethical lawyer, it's your duty bound to produce that list. Some of those documents may actually be confidential. Then it's now up to the judge whether to ask for that information to be released or not. Now, an example of this was a case where a client had died or a patient had died in a hospital and the body got lost. It's almost impossible to lose a whole human being. So they went around and they did a full investigation. Yes, the body was found, I think, 12 days later in an air duct or a vent. But when they submitted their investigation, there were just 2 documents on the list, and it's not possible. The documents are probably a receipt of a receipt that was paid when the patient was dropped in or something, and they're saying no, there's no way an inquiry wouldn't have been done, internal memos wouldn't have been sent, issues would not have been raised. It's your duty as an ethical lawyer to produce all that documentation, a list of it, not the documentation itself, but at least these are the things that we saw while we're doing the investigation, and then it's up to the court to decide. So even though you're zealously representing your client and you're trying to get your client's main objective gotten or main objective achieved, you still have to have an ethical way of advocating for your client, of representing that client that shows you in a good light. Okay? So that's basically the adversary system. It's a list of things that you have to go through and understand and just note, so that if you see them in questions or if you have a question related to it, you can list those things, put the cases there, explain that you understand it. Okay? So that is part B. Like I said, we have part C and D, and we've done an hour. So I would say we take a 5-minute break, come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll conclude. I can't hear you, you're muted.
So just before we go, this I see casebook under all of this. So what's that casebook mentioned?
So at the beginning of the syllabus, they tell you the 2 casebooks that you should have. If you look at page 3, format, materials, and readings.
Okay.
So it tells you materials, Alice Woolley and Richard Devlin. That's 1 casebook. So Alice Woolley, Richard Devlin, Brent Cotter, and GML Law, Lawyers, Ethics, and Professional Regulation. So whenever they refer to casebook, that's what they're referring to.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
So if they say casebook, and sometimes they'll give you the pages, chapters 2 and 3.
Yes.
They're referring to that text.
So that means I need to buy the casebook.
It depends on how you study. So I do have a few candidates who they have to read textbooks to understand. They want to see all the information, and they do that. And I do have other candidates who are happy with the notes because the notes are just basically compressed versions or summarized versions of your casebook.
Okay.
Okay, so somebody has sat down and taken the pertinent information and compressed them into notes. So throughout the NCA, as you start in the journey, you start hearing about people who have notes. There are a lot of tutors who've actually created their own notes for each course.
Okay.
And you can actually read those notes. But that's why I said it depends on how you study. Some people are good with notes. They go through the notes and they're fine. They have all the information. While some other people create notes from the textbooks. You wait for a few minutes. Okay, so yes, so you can send me like any additional question, but for like the price list, the structure of the intensive classes, the admin will get back to you definitely if you send a message to inquiries. So that has all the details on the structure, and the details should be on the website, to be honest. If you go to ncaaguys.com.
So just to guide my reading, because I think I should start studying now.
Okay.
Do you recommend I should buy the, what's it now? You said something about the notes here.
Yeah, so I would say
so if I don't want the textbook, I can just go, since you said the note is detailed.
Yes.
I can just do the notes, download the model code.
And
those two documents that material.
Yes, for your reading.
Okay.
Towards the exams, and if you join the intensive classes, we'll start talking about the index. So there is an NCA Guides index that we use for exams. It's a time-saving document. It helps you with finding the information you need quickly. It has summaries of the cases, summaries of the information. But obviously, I need you to get the information first. I need you to read first, understand the notes. Then towards the end, when we start doing how to answer the questions, cost-saving techniques and all of that, then we can start talking about the index.
All right, that's fine. I just want to know what to start with.
So the notes, so download the model
syllabus. And the syllabus I have, yes, is the 2018. It says August 2019.
Yes.
Is that
the most recent? Yeah.
That's okay.
As long as they're downloading it from the website, that's the most recent. If they updated it, as soon as they update it, it goes straight on their website. So usually, if you don't sit at this diet, just before the next diet, it makes sense for you to download again. But if it's the same August 2019, then you have the right one.
I want to give myself, because it's a new exam for me, and I would just say I am rusty. So I'm thinking of starting studies for, this is February, March, April, May, June. I don't know, because I'm doing it for the first time. So I want to do professional responsibilities and admin together. So I'm thinking of doing professional responsibility in June and probably admin in August.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, so after the August exams, maybe take a month break and study for another 2 papers that we'll do towards the end of the year into the new year. And I'm sure by then I've done 4, because I was assessed for 8, because I think I did my contract and lands. I think contract land and
property and tort.
Contract, property and tort is the 3 additional one that I have to do.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to get it all together. I'm sure by the time I do this and admin,
by the time you've done one, you'd get a better understanding of how the NCA works with PR. And if you go through admin, because admin is very similar to constitutional law, it's a part of foundations. Once you've gone through admin, it's also a good startup to understanding the other 2. So by the time you've done that, it's easier to just pick which other 2 you want to pull on and go ahead. Admin, constitutional, and foundations are actually intertwined.
Okay, thank you so much. So now I'll just start with the notes, and I have all my indexing. I would have done that.
Don't worry, you can index towards the end. Get the information first. Indexing is, so towards the exam, you know how you're going to structure, because by then you know what the information you're looking for is. So you now know, okay, fine, this is what I want to arrange first. This is the easiest way for me to get it, rather than indexing at the beginning when you still don't really have the information. So indexing is like I finished reading everything. I now want to prepare for exams. Preparing for exams is totally different from I have all the information. That's when you start saying, how do I index? Do I need an additional index? How do I answer my questions? How was my thought process in answering questions? Peace, we really do need you to put on your camera and say something. It's not a quiet class. I'm adding Godwin as well. Godwin, morning. Hello.
Morning.
Is that Peace?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. Would you be able to put on your camera?
Okay.
Thank you. Godwin, good morning.
Can you see me now?
Not yet. Not
Okay.
yet. Sure why.
Okay.
Godwin, good morning. Hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Peace, I can hear you. I just can't see you.
Oh, okay. What's going on? Okay, let me see. Can you see me?
Perfect.
See me now? Okay.
Also, that's Godwin, not even Peace.
Yeah, that's my son's account. I'm just gonna create my account. I was just trying to. I connected my phone. Yes.
Yeah,
I
that's
connected my phone, but I think I'm better off using the system.
okay. So you're on both accounts. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we actually did part A and B because I was trying to explain the whole structure of the syllabus.
Okay.
The video will go up on YouTube, so you can catch up on what was missed for sure. And then we'll go through C and D now. I think I started with Fumi and I explained to her that she needed to download the syllabus. I don't know how far you've gone. Have you started reading? Do you have anything? Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I've started reading. I have all my syllabus downloaded. I'm just trying to see how I can do the courses and the ones I can do within the maybe do them together or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I was saying that you definitely need your model code. You need to have your syllabus. You need to have your notes. Fumi was asking whether it was important to get the textbooks. I said it depends on how you read and study. Some people have to read textbooks, but a lot of the notes that have been prepared, we do have Manuel Akishola's notes on our website, the Ncaa Guides website, and a lot of the notes that have been prepared are a good, concise summary of what the textbooks are saying, like bullet points, so that all the information is distilled. We took a break around 8:50 something, and we're just back now. So I will run through C and D. C and D are really, B is the main part of it. So I would like you to go back. Once you will get an email with a link to the recording where you can go through A and B again. And then you can send an email to me, funto, FUNTO, at ncaaguides.com. If you do have further questions, like after you've watched it and you have questions,
Okay.
and then I can respond to you to clarify.
Yeah, so I just want to get the email again. Do I have it?
Funto, FUNTO,
Yeah.
at ncaaguides.com.
Okay. Okay.
So you can
Got it.
send me an email and then I can follow up with you. So going on, part C is a pretty simple part of the syllabus. It talks about some specific practice areas. Okay, so like I started and said at the beginning, professional responsibility has to do with every aspect of a lawyer's practice in Canada. We've heard there's actually a rule in the model code that says that you should not be used as an instrument of dupe. It is your duty and obligation not to be used as an instrument of dupe. So there is a matter before, or a matter that happened in Alberta, where a lawyer had no idea that her client was fraudulent with their mortgage. But because she was the lawyer on the mortgage, she got suspended for 3 months. She didn't know. They stated that she was unaware of the fact that they were committing fraud, but it is now up to you as a lawyer to be at the highest point of ethical representation, that if you find there is anything fishy, you either withdraw or you dig deeper. So in Canada, they're very specific. It affects every aspect of your practice. It's not just, oh, is this right or wrong? Even in real estate matters, even in handling clients, lawyer to lawyer relationship, the Groyer case that's attached to your syllabus, a lot of it had to do with lawyer to lawyer relationship, how he was in court, how he responded to the other lawyer. Was he rude? Do you understand what I mean? So every matter, every aspect of what you're dealing with in professional responsibility has to do with your ethical ability to just be on the highest point of it. I said to Fumi earlier that it's not just protecting the public and saying, oh, we need you to be on your best behavior. It's also protecting the profession. Because if you as a lawyer is seen to be like with integrity, people are going to keep coming to the law profession. But the instant you bring disrepute to the profession, it pulls down the whole profession. So everybody else loses clients because nobody has faith in you anymore. So them being strict is it's a full-on protection of, oh, we as a profession, we're trying to ensure that our profession continues and we're able to offer the services that we can. So specific practice areas that your syllabus is dealing with, they're going to talk about general issues to consider. So when does your lawyer-client relationship come into existence? We talked about that already. The main point to note is it doesn't just happen when you sign on the dotted line. It happens before that. A client comes to you, they want you to be their lawyer. They give you some information. And in giving you some information, there's already a duty of confidentiality that has arisen. You cannot share that information. Even if you decide not to go ahead, you're still bound to keep the information you get from that client confidential. That's where your ethical obligation starts from, even before the retainer is signed. So when they ask you when does the lawyer-client relationship come into existence, you will state the facts. Yes, when the offer is given, they've spoken to each other, they sign on the line, but you should also note that your duty for confidentiality arises once information is exchanged. So there's another case in the syllabus where a lawyer was dealing with a man for a labor matter. So he was handling a labor matter for the client, but he found out that the man had some marital issues. Okay. And in finding out that the man had marital issues, the wife worked in his office. He started to date the wife. This information is considered as confidential. He wouldn't have gotten that information if it wasn't seen as a client-lawyer relationship. And him then acting on that information was unethical. So he was reported and it was seen to be wrong. So you have to look at the lines of this, how taking in a lawyer, negotiator, mediator, arbitrator. If you look at the notes, there's a list of things that are expected, even in the model code. As an arbitrator, this is what you need to do. In disclosure obligations, this is what you need to do. What's the difference between lies and misrepresentation, misleading truths? Can you tell your clients to lie on the during trial? What are the adversarial rules? So all this section is mostly information. You just need to know what the model code is saying. Just make a note of it, know how to reference it, know which rules say what in relation to what. It might come out as a short answer question where they're asking you, what's your opinion on this? Or how do you think a lawyer should act in this instance? Or they give you a scenario and you can see in that scenario that the lawyer hasn't really acted ethical in maybe information gathering, or maybe they'll specifically state it. They'll say something like, in this particular instance, the lawyer wasn't able to do this. So that already raises like a red flag and you're like, that already seems like an unethical situation. You point it out, you check for which rule supports it and you move on. Okay?
Yeah.
Specific practice areas, ethics and the practice of criminal law. So they'll talk about criminal law as well. It's the same idea. Corporate counsel, government, and lawyers. Now, with corporate counsel, there's something that you should note, and they refer to it often, reporting up the ladder. So one thing you should note also with corporate counsel is it's a little unfortunate. With lawyers, we have many clients. You have many people talking to you. You have many people paying you. You have many matters to handle if you're on your own in a law firm. When you are a corporate counsel. You have one employer and one salary. So of course, you're a bit biased towards that person because that's where your money and your income is coming from. Now, what happens when your corporate client or your company commits fraud? It's going to be unfair to just say, go ahead and just leave your company, become jobless, and move on. So they created a structure called, and it was after the Enron. There's an American case, Enron, where it was found out that a lot of the lawyers were Enron, ENRON. You can Google it, it's really popular. A lot of the lawyers had a hand in committing that fraud, the fraud that was committed by Enron. So it was after this that they put these measures in place to ensure that lawyers were not involved, right, in any fraudulent activities of their companies. Now, what do they do? What does reporting up the ladder mean? The first thing is you've noticed that fraud has been committed. You're supposed to report to the person, the first line of command, the person you're in relation with, the person you're discussing with, the person you're working with. So this could be the chief legal officer, for example. The closest person to you in the company that you are working with. Report the fraud to them so that it can be cured. I said this at the start of the class, that they're not just saying you've committed something unethical and you've done something wrong. The model gives you the availability to cure those things. So in an instance of conflict of interest, like for example, you can seek the consent of your clients to represent them, to represent both of them. Okay? I'll go back to that a bit because it's something I missed for me when we're talking about conflict, but I'll go back to that when I'm done with this. So you do have to cure it. So reporting up the ladder, your way of curing it. You report to the person you're first in line with. If that person does nothing, you go ahead and report to the CEO. If the CEO doesn't cure it and does nothing as well, you report to the board of directors. If at the time you reported to the board and nothing is still done, then you are allowed to withdraw your representation from that company because you do not want to be associated with the fraud. Okay, so there's a whole long process of reporting up the ladder that they expect you to do as a corporate counsel whenever there's any issue that arises. Okay, and you would see that when you're reading it, but that's like one of the important things to note when you're talking about corporate counsel. And then government lawyers, they go ahead to explain, well, you're representing the government as a lawyer, what is expected of you, do you put the government above the people, do you put, since the government will be your client, how do you now react? How do you act in court? How do you bring pleadings? Things like that. So it's just a list of things that you also have to know and be aware of so that if you see them in questions, you're able to pinpoint them, okay, and focus on it. Now, what I realized I hadn't mentioned when we're talking about conflict of interest. In conflict of interest, we talked about the fact that it can be conflict between two clients of yours, conflict between the lawyer and the client. We talked about all of that. Now, when you're concurrently representing a client, there's a there's a rule that has been created by Justice Ncaa, okay? And it's called the bright line rule. So first of all, you've noticed that there's a conflict of interest that has arisen, and then you want to go ahead and represent concurrently, okay? So there's a step-by-step process. So you then go ahead and try to seek consent of both of the clients so that you can concurrently represent them. Now, the bright line rule is different in the fact that the bright line rule states that if two clients are adversely representing, let me see, the court held in the Ncaa case that the bright line rule prohibits concurrent representation. It says that if two clients are directly adverse in interest, there is a clear prohibition to representing them. So you can seek the client's consent to represent them if you believe there's no clear prohibition, okay? But if both of the clients have directly adverse interests, it's obvious that representing one is going to be against the other. Representing one is going to, do you understand what I mean? Once there's a directly adverse interest, there is a clear prohibition to representing them concurrently. Okay? So before we talked about conflict of interest, we talked about curing conflict of interest. Now we're saying that even though you can represent clients concurrently, if they have interests that are directly adverse, they're fighting, there's an issue. It's obvious that one person winning means the other losing. There's no middle ground. Then due to the bright line rule, you cannot represent them. Okay? Apart from the bright line rule, there's a substantial risk test. These are things you need to note. You have to understand them because there's a structure to answering the questions. Even after you feel you can still represent the clients, you've done all that you can, you've cured it, you still have to go ahead and still do this. It's just us proving that we're doing everything to the highest standard. You still have to go through the substantial risk test. There are 3 questions that you answer to show that, oh, I have done this, I've gone through this, and I feel even after answering all these questions, I can offer competent service to both clients. Then you can go ahead and represent them. That's your own cure to the issue of conflict of interest. You've raised it, you've checked the bright line rule, it's not contradictory, you've checked the substantial risk test, you've asked the question, then you can go ahead. One thing you should note about the bright line rule, though, is that it cannot be used as an instrument of fraud. How? I'll give you an example. The bright line rule says that you cannot represent 2 clients if they're directly adverse interests. So imagine that you work for a big multinational. There are 400 lawyers in your firm. Your firm now goes ahead and hires all the top lawyers I live in BC, so in Vancouver, up to top law firms, and puts them on retainer because they know that if any issue arises in the future and a client comes and tries to hire any of those lawyers, they're going to say, you can't hire our lawyer. We're directly adverse. It's obvious that what they've done is fraudulent. Do you understand? You can't use it for a tactical abuse. You can't use it to apply to circumstances where it's unreasonable to expect that the lawyer will represent the other client as well. So there's a list of exceptions to the bright line rule that you have to note too. Okay, and then try and look for examples so that you kind of understand what it's saying. And all these cases in the intensive classes will deal with cases where these things are seen so that you can understand what they mean by will not be it will be unreasonable when you expect that the lawyer shouldn't represent that person, for example. And I've given you an example of tactical abuse when one party tries to use the bright line rule to make sure that their lawyers don't represent other clients. Okay, did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we talked about C. I just realized I hadn't mentioned that when we talked about conflict of interest, so I wanted to raise it. And then D is access to justice. D is the shortest part of the syllabus. It talks about access to justice, access to legal services, who should pay, what are the problems and possible solutions. The first thing you must note about access to justice is that there's a limited access to justice in Canada. Canada has an issue. Oh, Dara made it. There's an issue of access to justice. There's a limited access to justice in Canada. Dara, hi. When you can, put on your camera and put on your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How are you?
I'm good. Hi, how are you?
Fine. You joined when we're about to wrap up.
Oh, I just finished from church.
I guessed as much. I mentioned it already. So the session is recorded and it will go up on YouTube. So you can definitely catch up. And obviously some good questions were asked as well. But I also mentioned that if you watch it and have questions after, then you can send me an email from ncaaguys.com to clarify anything that I said in the video. So access to justice, part D, it's the shortest part. It's the part that talks about legal aid, pro bono obligations, community clinics. Like I said, main important fact is that Canada has a limited access to justice. That is an important thing. You will see in all the notes, you see in the textbooks. And obviously, what does that mean? We know that we have First Nations people. We know that we have communities that are not like centrally located. Another thing is legal aid is offered to the lowest echelon of the people in society, but they don't offer legal aid to that middle class, that middle band that has the mass amount of people. And usually they offer legal aid to the lowest class of society. They don't really need legal aid in that they don't really have transactions that they're really handling. Whereas the middle class, that they're considered middle class, but obviously their income and all of that is still not allowing them to be able to afford the high paying services of lawyers. And so a high number of the people in the community will not. They will go to court, they will get traffic tickets and all of that, and nobody thinks of calling a lawyer because of the cost and the amount. There's actually a case where I think it was in BC, they tried to increase the tax for legal services, and the lawyers had to go up in arms and say, already people are not paid, or people are not paying because legal costs are high. Why are you taxing legal services? What you're doing is you're restricting access to justice rather than actually making it open to everyone. You didn't say, oh, we've increased the bandwidth of the legal aid options and the amount of people that can actually apply. Okay, so that's basically the discussion around access to justice. There's a part of also about rule of law, whether rule of law has a hand to play in it. So you should focus on that as well. Okay. So like I said, we would break the course up, even though the course is broken up into 4. The 4 classes would break the course up. Part B is the biggest part, so I like taking part B in 2 classes. So we can actually discuss all the issues that you focus on in conflict of interest and confidentiality. And then maybe the last class would be focused on C and D. Talk about those list of things that we need to know and the rules. Then the last class, if you're not attending the intensive class, is the one that even if you don't attend, you can pay to attend the exam prep. We do have an exam prep class. So now everybody has taken in all the information that they need. They know the course, they know the back and forth of it. Then we now start to structure how to answer those questions in the Ncaa format. Okay, how Ncaa expects you to answer, how to structure your rules, what they are actually asking from you if they ask some particular questions. Okay. Give me a second. Sorry. So do you have any questions, like while you were going through the syllabus, is there anything that you would like to ask or clarify?
Hi, Fonto.
Hi. That is
this is
on?
off. No, it's not on because it's quite distracting in the background because I just finished from church. But this is off like the syllabus. I just wanted to double check. The intensive classes would be on Saturday, right?
Yes, usually Saturday mornings. So where are you?
I'm in Ontario.
Ontario. So it won't be morning for you, it'll be 12 noon your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be sure it wasn't going to be on Sunday and I was going to have this issue.
No, because of church as well. So you know, last year, well, you would know because you're already sitting the Ncaa. So last year, you know that they restructured the Ncaa exams.
Yes.
So they've now spaced them 3 months. Every quarter we have all the exams spread over 3 months. So because of that, we restructured how we're taking the intro classes, because it doesn't make sense to have admin when they're having a diet right now. So that's why we're having this on Sunday morning. But usually intro classes and the intro and the full intensive is usually Saturday morning.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's basically a run through. For me, this is your first time being exposed to the syllabus. How was it? Are you better with the information? Did it make a little bit of sense, structure?
Yes, it does. It does.
Fantastic. And like I said, if you need more information about it, you can send the classes. You can send an email to inquiries. The admin will definitely respond with all the information that you need. For Peace and Dara, the video would go up and we'll send an email out for you to watch the video. Most of the videos, so we probably have 3 or 4 intro videos on YouTube already. It's usually the same thing, but because I'm speaking from the top of my mind, each class is different. but it would have information on different aspects or whatever. So you can actually watch this one over again or go and look at another one and see whether there are different explanations to something else in one of the other intro classes. Okay?
The intensive class, would you still take it from the start again, or would you?
So no, this is just so all we did was run through the syllabus and what each one means. So we will start again, definitely from part A. So we did think about it, then realized that a few people don't come to the intro classes and join the intensive. A few people join the intensive, or do you understand what I mean? So we, instead of saying it over again, this is an overview to kind of explain what you need, what the course is saying, what you should look at. And then class A will start from, first class will start from part A, again, from scratch. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, look at your syllabus. There are definitely questions in each part or each explanation of your syllabus. I would say you don't have to write it out, but when you finish reading a chapter, go and check those questions out and see if you can respond to them and have your own perspective on what those questions are saying. Like, what is a profession? You should be able to say what a profession is. What is self-regulation? You should be able to say it in your head so that you know that, okay, fine, at least I got that while I was reading. And then short answer questions as well. You can look through the exam. This is after you've taken in the information and read. You can look at the past questions, at their short answer questions. It would really help if you sit down and write out like a response. I know people like to think about it in their minds, but writing out a response really helps, because in the exams, if you have that with you and they're asking a question that you've answered before, then you don't have to start putting your sentences together and trying to think about how you want to couch it. You've answered it before. Do you understand what I mean? Or you can cut it and chop it and say, okay, fine, I have what is a profession written out somewhere. Let me just pick that up and add it. So everything you're trying to do is save you time in the exams, because keeping to time is really important with the Ncaa exams. Most people don't finish. Yeah. So thank you. I hope it was clear, at least the parts you listened to and you're able to understand. We will send out an email, and then I wanted you to know, well, do know that it's recorded and we'll be putting it up so that you can watch it again. And send an email to me. I've dictated my name to funto@ncaaguys.com. If you have a question, you've watched the video and you want to clarify something. And hopefully we see you at the intensive classes and we can talk more and discuss more about the course itself. If not, you can read through and then attend one of the exam preparation classes so that we can actually discuss structure and how the information you've read actually makes sense. Okay? Thank you so much for coming to class. Talk to you guys soon.
All right, bye.